Greetings everyone. Welcome to Narayana IAS. This is Chaitanya. Today I am going to take up the daily news analysis where we are going to select certain important articles from the Hindu and Indian Express. The articles that we have chosen today are first one, Community Rights and Forest Conservation. It is from the Hindu, page number 8, where we are going to see the amendments that are done in the Forest Conservation Act and how it impacts the rights of the tribals, at the same time the conservation efforts of the forest. Next is Enhancing the Representation for a Just Electoral System. It is from the Hindu, page number 6, where we are going to see the necessary reforms that are required to improve the electoral participation. At the same time, see that there is equity, so that there is parity in terms of representation among different regions within the country India. Next, the World Diabetic Day. It is to inform you regarding the causes of diabetes and how to control them and the measures pursued. It is from the Indian Express, page number 4, and with little help from the Sun, where we are going to explore the small grids for generation of electricity, and thus we could localize the generation and transmission as well. It is from the Indian Express, page number 13. And the last one, once upon a time, a plan to join Red Sea with Mediterranean Sea through Israel. It is to see that we could have an alternative route rather than relying solely on Egypt through Suez Canal for transportation of goods between the Red Sea and Mediterranean Sea. It is from the Indian Express, page number 17. Now, let us begin our analysis. Coming to the article on the definitional changes of the forest, that is, what constitutes forest. Recently, we have seen an amendment passed by the Parliament which has changed the definition of forest. How it will impact the conservation efforts, that is, how to conserve the forest, and how it will impact the rights of the indigenous people or the tribals that inhabit those lands, and at the same time, how it will impact the economical usage of the forest, that is, use of forest for non-forest purposes. That is what we are going to see in this article. The title of the article is Community Rights and Forest Conservation. The relevance of the topic is Forest Conservation Amendment Act of 2023. The UPSC syllabus, GS3 Environment, Policies and Conservation. You could look also into the previous questions to know what topics are of relevance. Recognition of Forest Rights Act 2006. The Forest Rights Act. So this topic is of importance to understand the impact it has on the forest rights that have been bestowed upon the tribals of the country. Now let us look into the article. The context is the recent amendment passed by the Parliament. Now, what happens is the definitional change. Ultimately, it talks about conservation of the forest, but we are significantly reducing the scope of the definition, the scope of the extent of forests that exist in India. If we say that a particular region is forest, then it comes under forest, or else it doesn't come under forest. What this Amendment Act does is it reduces the scope of the definition to define particular region as forest. So what happens is this will impact our governance of the forest. What is forest governance? It is nothing but you are managing the forest, you are conserving the forest, at the same time we are trying to use the resources of the forest sustainably. Okay? Ultimately, we try to see that the usage of the forest doesn't impact the quality of the forest. Even if it impacts the quality of the forest, we try to compensate it by taking afforestation measures or other measures that will ultimately restore the quality of the forest. Because we cannot expect to continue the activities like mining if we focus solely upon the conservation of forest. We have to use the forest, but it should be sustainable. Now, let us look into the forest governance in India. We have constitutional provisions where the forests come under the concurrent list. Concurrent list is an indication that both the central and state government have been given the jurisdiction to govern or to manage the forest. Now, the acts and policies that deal with the governance of the forest, these are Indian Forest Act 1927, Forest Conservation Act 1980, National Forest Policy of India 1988, Forest Rights Act 2006, Compensatory Afforestation Fund Act 2006. So these are the laws that govern the management of the forest. The forest management is ultimately our ability to see that we could use the forest resources sustainably. At the same time, the locals who inhabit those forest lands, their livelihood is also protected because they rely on the forest for their livelihood. Next, the background of the recent amendment. The background is with regards to the broader interpretation of what constitutes forest. Supreme Court in Godavarman Tirumulkad case 1996 has given a broader definition of what constitutes forest. This virtually expanded the jurisdiction of what constitutes forest. And if you know the one thing, what we try to do again and again is conserve the forests. And we have stricter laws to conserve them. That is, it is not easy to convert forest to non-forest. And conversion of the forest to non-forest is essential for economically utilizing the forest land. But because here we have expanded the jurisdiction of forest, it becomes difficult for us to economically use it, like mining or building roads, etc. and etc., building schools, etc. Thus, it will impact our ability to use those lands. What that ultimately led to is there was restriction from the private people and others regarding this broader expanse of what constitutes forests. The private people, the individuals and industries, etc., have opposed this broader interpretation of what constitutes forests. So what happened is, government has come up with the Amendment Act. This Amendment Act is now determining the extent of forests. At the same time, how to economically utilize it. We want to see that we sustainably use the forest land. But because we are reducing the size of the forests, now the forest could be used for non-forest purposes. Don't get confused here. The forest that I'm stating here is not the forest that has been designated by central or state governments. Of course, there is land that is designated by the central and state governments as forest. Here, what we are talking is the land which has not been designated as forest, and thus we could use them for non-forest purposes. So, what is forest? Is nothing but what 1927 Forest Act says what the forest is. And at the same time, central and state government have designated forests. And beyond it, whatever that is present is not forests. That could be used for economical purposes. Of course, there too we require to get the permissions, but they are not as stringent when they come under the forest area. But there are exemptions regarding the forest designated area as well. So we could also utilize the forest which has been designated by the central and state governments as forest. The exemptions are as follows. The forests which have been converted for non-forest purposes on or after December 12, 1996. Okay. So these could be continuously regarded as non-forests. Cannot turn them as forest lands. Next is the infrastructure that is to be created for security purposes by the central government. The 100-kilometer from China and Pakistan border, at the same time taking security related measures as we are facing problems with left-wing extremisms or insurgency activities, etc. Then is the forests which are considered as vulnerable up to 5 hectares of land. These are the exemptions that are given under the recent amendment acts. Now, the issues. The challenging issue is the allocation of forests for activities like ecotourism, safari, environmental, entertainment, etc. These could have detrimental impact upon the ability of us to maintain the quality of the forest. Next is the effect it will have on the rights of the tribals. If we conserve the forest by expanding the definition of forest, more and more tribal will have their rights protected under the Forest Rights Act. Now we are not considering them as forests, then how could we expect those legislations which actually empower the tribals to claim forest rights in the first place, especially to their economical aspects, especially to their economical livelihood, like access to minor forest produce or the hectares of land which they have inherited from their past for agriculture related activities. Thus, it is said that it might actually impact the livelihood as well as the rights of the tribals who live or inhabit in these areas, because now we are not going to consider them as forest land. And For the forest lands, we have to take prior consent from the Gram Sabhas to use it for non-forest purpose. But because now we are not considering them as forest in the first place, we need not take the permission from the Gram Sabhas. This could actually increase the displacement. And the other issues are the compensatory issue. We are trying to compensate for the usage of the forest lands, but we did not clearly define in the legislation regarding the type of trees that are to be planted there for afforestation activity. So this will actually impact the quality of the forest. And the other issue, the recent amendments doesn't deal properly with the human-animal conflict and also the conservation of the wildlife as well. And also the strategic linear projects which are under the exempted category could also impact the ability to conserve the forests. Why? Because these ultimately impact the usage of the forest land. So there is a need for proper definition to see what areas are to be designated as strategic areas for the central government, and thus only those areas are to be utilized for strategic purposes. A clear-cut definition is difficult, thus generally discretion is vested to the central government to decide the strategic purposes. Coming to the article is on just representation. Electoral politics is fine, but without just representation, we cannot expect the full potential of democracy of India to be realized. For that, we need certain reformations. This article is going to deal about it. We are going to see what kind of reforms are required for India so as to promote democratic participation of politics in India. The title of the article is Enhancing Representation for a Just Electoral System. The relevance, we are going to see about the representation in India, that is how we elect our representatives, electoral reforms, and proportional representation as one of the reformistic idea to improve the democratic credentials of the country. The syllabus, prelims, polity and governance, and mains with respect to the union and the states. How we could improve the participation of the states and how to see that the elections are done in a fair manner. The context, there is non-uniformity in representation in India. What is this non-uniformity? Non-uniformity is nothing but there is no uniformity in terms of elections. Certain states are seeing advantageous returns out of the election process, while certain states are at a disadvantage. What we want is equal voice to be heard from all corners of the country and from every region of the country. That is the context. How to address is what we are going to see. The major concerns is the seats, because if you look at Uttar Pradesh, it sends the highest seats when compared to other regions. So the influence of the Uttar Pradesh state is far greater on account of its sheer size. So we want to see that there is equal voice. Then the delimitation issues. Delimitation is nothing but we are redrawing the boundaries of the constituencies, and through the constituencies, the people of the constituencies elect the elected representatives, that is MLAs or MPs. The delimitation issue is especially important. Why? Because now we are going to again conduct census. Probably we will conduct by 2024 or later, and that ultimately leads to delimitation of the constituencies, which will select that ultimately will lead to delimitation of the constituencies. We have to see that it is done in a fair manner. The potential solutions are, we have to take precautions for the next delimitation that we are going to see. Next, electoral reforms, like for example, proportional representation is one such electoral reform. And we have to see that the size of the states is reduced, because certain states, because of its sheer numbers, is becoming more influential. Thus, we have to bring parity among the states. Now, let us look into the issue of non-uniformity in seats in India. The thing is that the size of the constituencies in terms of the population vary in India. In US, 7 lakh citizens, that is close to 7 lakh citizens, send one representative. In Pakistan, it is close to 6 lakhs. But in India, the average size is 25 lakhs. It is huge. Next, there is population disparity, that is differences in terms of population. Uttar Pradesh has its highest. So, the possibility of the influence is higher. And there are smaller states like Sikkim. Okay. So, there is disparity in terms of the electoral voice, at the same time, political influence. And the thing is that there is less influence of the individual votes. Why? Because ultimately we club together the individual votes to elect one representative, and thus what happens is it is dependent upon the population density. The voice of the individual vote counts, and thus Kerala's relatively higher population density leads to lesser influence per vote. We have to check these anomalies. That is, we need to bring uniformity by reducing the influence of the numbers which should not influence the politics. There is concern with regards to the delimitation. Let us look into what delimitation is. Delimitation is nothing but redrawing the constituency boundaries. There is a constitutional provision that deals with the delimitation of the boundaries. Article 82 of Indian Constitution empowers the President, who creates a delimitation commission which undertakes the process of the delimitation. So you have to remember this article. And the issues are unequal population. So the differences in terms of the population leads to differences in terms of undertaking the delimitation processes. Next, the performance penalization issue. Why? Because we have froze the delimitation and the allocation of the number of seats to the particular states, because we have connected these two aspects with the population control measures. That is, despite taking the delimitation, that is, changing the constituency boundaries, what has happened is the states which were not able to control the population has witnessed the rise in population in their constituencies. Though their representation is the same, but the constituency in terms of population, the size has increased. Thus, the people have no active voice to raise their concerns as per the rise in populations. But this has been done with the concern that there is a need for us to control the population. The southern states have done well in terms of controlling the population. But the problem that may arise in the future is, for undertaking the delimitation exercises in the future, we are also, or the certain states have raised the concern that population might be one of the criteria in terms of undertaking delimitation process plus allocation of the seats. Whereas earlier, it was favorable to the states who are controlling the population. Later on, it might become a boon to the states who have not taken active role in controlling the population. Next, the possibility of gerrymandering. Delimitation has a caveat. There is a possibility of gerrymandering, that is, shifting the boundaries of the constituency such that it might suit a particular political party which is in power. The parties in power generally try to redraw the boundaries of constituencies to have demography in such a manner that that demography favors these political parties. As you know, in India we are facing the issue of vote bank politics. There is a possibility that political parties might redraw boundaries so that they get the power greater when compared to the opposition parties. So that too is an issue. What are the solutions associated with the delimitation issue that we are facing? We have to increase the parliamentary seats. There is a need to increase the parliamentary seats. Why? Because there are certain constituencies where the population size is way greater than which is acceptable or which could be considered as a standard. As you know, higher the population, the lower the voice of the people who are part of that constituency. Next is diverse criteria for delimitation. We should not make population as a central criterion to decide the delimitation. We have to also consider other factors like geographical boundaries, economical aspects of that particular constituency, linguistic factors, that is, also deal with the diversities of that particular constituency. Next, inclusive representation. That is, we have to give the voice not only to the bigger states but also to the smaller states like Sikkim. Especially we could use the Rajya Sabha where each state might be given equal seats, like we are seeing in the United States, where Senate, that is, the upper house, has equal seats. That is, the states have equal voice in the upper house, in the Senate, that is, senates. They send 2 senates per state. The electoral reforms that we could carry, the equal representation in Rajya Sabha, as we already seen, and introduction of direct elections for Rajya Sabha rather than the indirect election. Why? Because what is happening is the political parties are having a say over the representation in the Rajya Sabha rather than individuals who have the trust of the particular constituency. The proportional representation could also be used, could also be looked into as an idea. Why? Because proportional representation enables the participation of different communities. Presently, we are following the system of first past the post, which requires simple majority to get representation. But in the garb of simple majority, we are missing the minority votes. The minority couldn't be simply regarded here as the religious minority. It might be in terms of class, it might be in terms of caste or other variables. We have to see that the representation is wider. For that, proportional representation could be used as a mechanism to increase the participation in politics from wider communities as well. Thus, this enables widespread participation in politics. We could also look into the idea of smaller states. The new states should be small. That is, we could create new states from the existing states which have higher sizes, especially the states like Uttar Pradesh. There is a proposal to make 4 states from the existing, from the Uttar Pradesh that we are witnessing now. Next, efficiency. The thing is that the smaller states are considered to be more efficient when compared to the larger states. The lesser the population, the nearer it will be to the ruling establishment. If the state size is higher or larger, it becomes difficult to have the right connect between the politicians or the political representatives and the states. Especially if the capital is far away from the regions which are in the borders or which are far away from the capital, it becomes difficult to promote efficiency in administration. So efficiency could also be looked into if you have smaller sizes. Then the local focus will be higher. Why? Because the state might have different regions with different socio-economic developmental levels. This provides us an opportunity to listen to the varied problems, Then is citizenship engagement could also be increased. Why? Because as we know, the smaller size could enable the right connect or it improves the connectivity between the ruling establishment as well as the citizens of that particular state. Next, tailored policies to actually suit to the smaller states. As we already seen, the differences in socio-economic developmental levels within states, and thus we could frame policies that suits to that region rather than relying on one size fit all approach. This completes the article. Let us look into another article. Today, the November 14th is World Diabetes Day. On this day, we need to know about the causes of diabetes and how to control the diabetes in the first place. So there is an article in the Indian Express that explains about the diabetes. Let us look into the issue. Title is World Diabetes Day. The relevance is knowing about the non-communicable diseases because presently the deaths caused by non-communicable diseases are greater than the communicable diseases. And diabetes is one among the major non-communicable diseases that our country is facing as well as the world is facing. UPSC syllabus, prelims, general science related topic. At the same time for mains, GS2, we are going to deal about the health related issues. Now let us look into the article. Firstly, the context is the World Diabetes Day, that is November 14th. It is to generate awareness among the population about the impacts of the diabetes and how to overcome the possible cause and how to overcome the causes that ultimately leads to diabetes. About the diabetes. So what is diabetes? Diabetes is a condition where our body is not able to produce enough insulin, or our body is not able to utilize the insulin that is produced in our body. Okay? That is, it revolves around the hormone that is insulin. Now, what the insulin does? The insulin has the ability to convert the glucose that is stored in the blood to energy. Okay? So we use the glucose that is there in the blood that is converted to energy, and this is the energy that we consume for our activity. This is one of the important reactions that is undertaken in our body, and insulin enables that reaction. But if it is not done properly, it will have detrimental impact upon our body. The impacts that we are going to see in our body are wide ranging, from the heart diseases, stroke, kidney diseases, and blindness. The number of patients in India are the second highest among the world. If you look at the numbers, it is close to 74 million people who are feeling the impact of the diabetes. Now let us look into the types of diabetes. There are three types of diabetes. There are diabetes mellitus, diabetes insipidus, and gestational diabetes. Now firstly, let us look into diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is a condition where our body is not able to produce enough insulin. At the same time, our body is not able to absorb the produced insulin properly. If you are not able to do both, then you are not able to produce sufficient energy that is required for the body, or there is a possibility of excessive storage of glucose levels in the blood. We already seen the consequences of excessive storage of glucose levels in the blood in the previous slide. Now let us look into the type of diabetes, diabetes mellitus. Diabetes mellitus is of two types, type 1 and type 2. The type 1 diabetes is a condition where our pancreas gland that is in our body is not able to produce enough insulin that is required for the body. This is type 1 diabetes. So there is no enough insulin in secretion in our body. The symptoms are unexplained weight loss, hunger, slow healing cuts, etc. That is, our body is not able to heal from the wounds quickly. Next comes the type 2 diabetes. Type 2 diabetes is on account of genetically inherited characteristic traits. We inherit genes from our parents, and there are certain genetical characteristic traits that exist in these genes which could ultimately lead to the possibility of experiencing diabetes in the lifetime. This type of diabetes generally is experienced after the age of 45 plus. The symptoms are slow, steady weight loss, etc. Now let us look into the other type of diabetes insipidus. Diabetes insipidus is a condition where our body is not able to produce enough of the hormone that is antidiuretic hormone, that is ADH hormone. ADH hormone is important for us to regulate the extent of water that we secrete. The kidney is not able to control the water that we secrete, and thus there is a possibility of increase in water of our urine. So excessive urine is produced if an individual suffers from diabetes insipidus. Now let us look into the third type of diabetes. Third type of diabetes, that is gestational diabetes. Gestational diabetes is experienced or witnessed by the pregnant mothers, either before birth or after the birth. There is a possibility of unexplained levels of sugar levels. So these are experienced by the mother. The unexplained levels of sugar levels ultimately impacts the ability of the insulin to control the or insulin to utilize this sugar for converting it to energy. And this imbalance could ultimately leads to the possibility of diabetic disease among that mothers. Coming to the causes of diabetes, firstly, genetical predisposition. See, we could inherit certain traits from our parents that could lead to diabetes. So this is one of the leading causes of diabetes. Generally, it is seen for the individuals of the age 45 plus years. Next, the other three are interconnected, that is obesity and overweight, sedentary lifestyle, and unhealthy diet. See, obesity and overweight is due to the unhealthy diet, that is we consume more energy rich foods than what is required for the body. especially the carbohydrates and fats. And the other thing is that the sedentary lifestyle, where we are not actively consuming the energies that we intake through our diet, these ultimately leads to the insulin resistance, the imbalance that occurs in the body on account of the higher blood glucose levels and the reaction of this glucose with the insulin, where insulin, as we already seen, converts this glucose into energy. And this imbalance could lead to the inability of the insulin to regulate the glucose levels because of the higher or lower glucose levels of the blood. So there is a need for proper diet, proper activity, that is healthy exercises, etc., to actually control the glucose levels and thus see that insulin is functioning properly in our body. Next, the measures to control the diabetes. The Global Diabetes Compact, which has been initiated by WHO in the year 2021, is one of the measures to control the diabetes. The other is our program, national level program, National Program for Prevention and Control of Cancer, Diabetes, Cardiovascular Diseases and Stroke. If you look into it, all of them are related to non-communicable diseases. Presently, non-communicable diseases are the leading cause when compared to the communicable diseases, and thus there is a need to control them. So, the Government of India has prioritized to improve the health infrastructure as well as the human resources that are required to tackle these diseases. The other is, which we are dealing with, that is World Diabetes Day on the November 14th, that we celebrate every year. Annually since the year 1991, it is to generate awareness among the diabetes among the population and thus try to control it by changing the behavioral patterns of the society. Now let us look into the next topic. Coming to the article, with a little help from the sun. As the name itself suggests, we are going to take the help from the sun. And the help is with regards to generation of electricity. Solar energy is becoming more and more prominent, cost efficient, effective, and the whole world is adopting solar energy. There is one initiative taken which is trying to provide solar energy to the houses by using small grid connected solar energy generation as well as supply. That is what we are going to see in this article. The title of the article is With a Little Help from the Sun. The relevance, we are going to see about mini grids, because Government of India has also started an initiative in the past to produce electricity using mini grids. International Solar Alliance and Global Solar Facility, both these two, that is International Solar Alliance and GSF, are the initiative of India where it tried to collaborate with the rest of the world, and mains GS paper 3 as well as infrastructure. Okay, GS paper 3, it also deals with environment as well. Now about the context. The context is World Bank has recently started an initiative where it has put forward the idea of establishing thousands of small grids to generate electricity, and it is in the country Nigeria. So close to 90 million Nigerians will be benefited from this initiative as per the plan. And what is mini grid? Mini grid, as the name itself suggests, it is mini in nature in terms of size of generation of electricity as well as supply. So it is small scale electricity generation, and this generation of electricity will be ultimately supplied to small localized group of customers. Okay, so this is like a decentralized platform. And the important aspect of this small grid generation of electricity is they operate locally. We need not take the assistance from the national level or centralized supply of transmission, centralized transmission and distribution of electricity. So we could generate on our own in the remote spaces which might not have the grid connect with the centralized supply of electricity. That is a defining feature of it. This enables us to supply the electricity to the remotest corner. Despite not having the requisite infrastructure in these developing countries, we could take the assistance of these small grid electricity supply networks. So this is the mini grid. We could produce it nearer to our houses and see that this produced electricity is consumed by us. Added to it, we could use this produced electricity to supply it to the main grid, and thus we could benefit from the electricity which is produced in excess than the requirement. The significance of it is the private sector could be incorporated into this activity and enabled the productivity and could be used for production, especially the individual households as well. And the thing with the solar energy generation is the cost of production is declining year after year. So this is becoming an attractive option for the private enterprises to produce electricity through the usage of solar energy. Again and again, we are stressing the need for mitigating the emissions. So mitigating emissions is nothing but we want to reduce the carbon emissions, and this is an attractive option for reducing the carbon emissions. Because solar energy generation will not lead to emission of carbon dioxide, which is not the case for thermal power plant. Thus, it is an alternative to the production. Let us look at the case study from India. So in Uttar Pradesh, Bihar, and Jharkhand, we have thousands of small grids which will produce electricity at the same time which will produce electricity and supply to the villages. Now let us look into the challenges. The challenges is the investments from the developing countries are still lower. As you know, we are still reliant upon the fossil fuels for generation of electricity because it is much cheaper to produce from thermal power plants. Using the coal, we are still relying on them. Despite having significant advantages of using solar power, the production has to come down. The developed countries are investing more, but the developing countries constitute greater than 50% of the population, yet the investments are lower. That is one challenge. And the steps that are taken are the International Solar Alliance has been established. With the will of India, India, in collaboration with the France, has initiated a new organization that focuses upon generation of electricity from the solar energy. It tries or it has the initiatives to build technologies to produce solar energy efficiently. At the same time, build systems to transmit this electricity from the and build systems to transmit the electricity as well. So, International Solar Alliance has been started, which has actually initiated $100 million global solar facility to facilitate projects to produce electricity from solar energy. And what this global solar facility will do is it wants to scale solar investments in Latin America, West Asia, and Caribbean islands. The three funds will try to generate more investment in these projects through payment guarantee fund, insurance fund, and investment fund for technical assistance. As we already seen, it wants to build technologies, and one of the ways is by providing funding. Next is the way forward. The thing is that solar energy is financially viable. At the same time, it is important to mitigate climate change. The attractiveness of it is increasing day by day. At the same time, it has the element of localizing generation. Thus, rural communities which are vulnerable to climate change, which are in the far off regions, could take the assistance from these technologies. Now, also, we are going to see about International Solar Alliance. It is an initiative by India, and the main aim is to generate solar power, and it has been launched in the year 2015 in Paris. I already said that it is in collaboration with the France, and it has been initiated while Conference of Parties 21 was in session. You know, Conference of Parties are conducted under the framework of United Nations Framework Convention for Climate Change. The primary objective is nothing but to exploit the solar power to generate electricity using the solar energy. It is headquartered at Gurugram, India. Let us look into another article. This article is about the connectivity between Mediterranean Sea and the Red Sea. We know that the entire world is dependent upon Suez Canal for transportation of goods from the Europe to Asia as well as Asia to Europe. There is a plan devised to actually connect through the Israel. So that is what we are going to see in this article. The title of the article is Once Upon a Time. The title of the article is Once Upon a Time, a Plan to Join Red Sea with Mediterranean Sea. The relevance of the topic is we are going to study about the connectivity between Red Sea and the Mediterranean Sea, as well as how to diversify the trade routes. The importance is specifically mostly to the prelims but at the same time geopolitical aspects, international relations related as well. Why? Because United States tried to reduce the reliance upon the Egypt, because in the future, if there are any rifts between the United States as well as Egypt, it will become difficult for it to have various access routes to navigate the goods or transport the goods. The context is nothing but there was a plan designed under the name Ben Gurion Canal Project to connect Red Sea and Mediterranean Sea. That is the plan. Now let us see about this Ben Gurion Canal Project. The historical background is it was in the year 1963, US Department of Energy has conducted a study to look into the possibility to connect between the Red Sea and Mediterranean Sea. As you know, it is rift with challenges. That is what we are going to see here. See, the route traverses through Israel. Okay, route traverses through Israel, but the thing is, it is dependent upon the political stability of the Gaza Strip as well. If the project is materialized, if there is no political stability in Gaza Strip, it is difficult for them to continue the operations in this canal. The conception of project is fine, but materializing is the issue now. The idea is it will travel through Israel's Negev desert, and it will go from tip of Gulf of Aqaba to the eastern Mediterranean coast. Okay, so that is the route it travels through. Now let us look into the need for alternatives. Why are we looking for alternatives despite having a Suez Canal? The problem is the congestion. Because of the excessive reliance upon the Suez Canal, we are observing congestions. If you look at the specific case, in March 2021, a heavy ship got stranded that led to building up of traffic. The other challenge is historical conflict, because Arabs and Egypt are in coalition. But historically, we have seen the issues between Israel and Egypt and the coalition between Egypt and Russia, and these geopolitical tensions might spiral out of control. Ultimately, Egypt, being the monopoly in terms of controlling the Suez Canal, could ultimately make it difficult for other countries to access this channel. And the increased traffic is the other reason. We have already seen the congestion being the issue. Not only the congestion which is happening on account of stranding of certain ships, as we have seen in March 2021 case, the problem is increasing traffic. More and more ships are traveling through this because of the increased prosperity of the world. Because of that, the demand of the goods are increasing. As you know, ship traveling through the oceans is the primary way through which we transport the goods and services. Thus, we are reliant upon the ships for transportation. Thus, we want to reduce the congestion. In 2022, if you look into it, there is an increase of 6.2% of the traffic. The high tolls, because of the monopoly of Egypt, because of the reliance of Egypt upon Suez Canal route for generation of revenue, that is, it is dependent upon it. It is one of the important component of the revenue that it collects. The tolls are high, and thus the cost of transportation is high. So we want to see that the cost is reduced. But there are challenges with the present Ben Gurion Canal project. The project is the length. The length of this project will be higher than the previous. That is, the length of this will be higher than the Suez Canal length by over 100 kilometers. And at the same time, the risks associated with it. We've already seen the risks associated with the stability in the Gaza Strip. At the same time, we have environmental challenges, radioactive contamination, and even nuclear accidents. Why we are talking about the nuclear accidents is because the conception of the project has also taken into element the need for using nuclear weapons to construct the project. Okay, so nuclear blasts, but these have environmental consequences. Next is the logistic issue. The issue is because the money that is required, the resources that are required to construct the project, and the politics. As you know, the politics is far more complex. Egypt might raise its apprehension of the project. At the same time, the Gaza Strip is involved in it. The Arabs might not accede to the demand of the West. Why? Because they are trying to establish an independent Palestinian state. Thus, all this makes it difficult for us to construct the project. Now let us look into certain prelims questions that have been formed on the basis of the knowledge that we have given it to you through the past articles. Firstly, consider the following statement about Ben Gurion Canal project, where we have dealt about construction of canal as an alternative to Suez Canal. It is proposed sea level canal through the Negev desert in Israel. This is true, as we already seen in the article, and it would connect Red Sea to the Mediterranean Sea. This too is true. So both the statements are true. So the answer is C, both 1 and 2. The next question is, consider the following statements about the types of diabetes. Type 1 diabetes is caused by insulin resistance and relative lack of insulin. This is false because type 1 diabetes is actually related to the pancreas. And it is caused by insulin resistance and relative lack of insulin. This is about type 2 diabetes. Next statement is, type 2 diabetes is caused by autoimmune attack on the insulin producing beta cells of the pancreas. This is about the type 1 diabetes, as we already seen in the explanation of the first statement itself. The third statement is, diabetes insipidus is a type of diabetes that is characterized by excessive thirst and urination. As we already seen, this type of diabetes, that is diabetes insipidus, deals with the inability of a gland to produce ADH hormone. This ultimately impacts the functionality of kidneys, leading to excessive urification. Now the question is, how many of the above statements are correct? As both statement 1 and 2 are false, the answer is only 1A. The next question is, Global Solar Facility is an initiative of. We already seen about the International Solar Alliance and its assistance through Global Solar Facility, through which it wants to expand generation of electricity using solar energy. So the answer is International Solar Alliance A. Next, the prelims question, with respect to Forest Conservation Amendment Act of 2023, which of the following are not covered under the provisions of the Act? First one, forest land situated along a rail lines maintained by the government. It is not covered. Forest land situated within a distance of 100 kilometers along international borders. It too is not covered. Forest areas up to 10 hectares for construction of security related infrastructure. This too is not correct, not covered. Forest area up to 10 hectares for defense related projects in a left-wing extremist affected areas. These are the exempted areas or exempted aspects from the Forest Conservation Act, as we have seen in the explanation of Forest Conservation Act. So the answer is D, all four statements. Next, let us look into one mains question to tackle about the lack of uniformity in terms of representation in Indian electorate. So, examine the challenges of lack of uniformity in representation in Indian legislature and suggest measures for improving democratic representation and governance. Let us look into the approach to tackle this question. Firstly, introduction. Introduce that there is lack of uniformity in representation. That is malapportionment. As we know, in India, we have different states and different states have different influence at the center. Why? Because of the differences in terms of representation in numbers in both Rajya Sabha and Lok Sabha. So explain this in introduction, thus generating a need for promoting parity or uniformity among the states. In the body, write down the reasons for malapportionment that have already been mentioned in the analysis of the article and why it leads to disproportionate representation, that is differences in terms of representation among the different states, ultimately impacting the federalism. Why? Because it will promote unitary structure where certain states with their political acumen will be able to control the politics of the entire country, which will ultimately or may lead to a rift between different regions within the country, impacting the federalism. By because ultimately it will impact the voices of different states, especially the ones which have less influence. This will also erode public trust. Why? Because we elect representatives to represent our voice, but that power is hijacked by other aspects of the electoral or political system, thus impacting the trust of the public. Now, also state the measures. The measures to improve democratic system, as we have seen certain measures like proportional representation, smaller states, etc., and also delimitation on the basis of other factors rather than population being the sole criterion. Next, give a conclusion in which you state the need for addressing malapportionment and thus promote parity in terms of representation. This completes the articles as well as the analysis of the questions. Please do like, share, and subscribe to the channel. This completes the session. Thank you.